The notification popped up on my phone at exactly 2:47 p.m. while I was presenting quarterly projections to our biggest client in downtown Denver. Motion detected in living room. I almost ignored it, thinking Lucas had gotten home early from school, but something made me tap the alert anyway. What I saw on my Nanny cam feed made my blood freeze mid-sentence about conversion rates and market penetration. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There was my husband Derek, supposed to be at a job site in Lakewood, passionately kissing our 22-year-old babysitter Chloe on our leather couch. The same couch where I read bedtime stories to our 6-year-old son Lucas every night. The same couch where Derek and I had planned our future together just 3 years ago when we bought this house in Highlands Ranch. But here's what Derek didn't know as he whispered sweet promises to the young woman I trusted with my child's safety. I'd been recording everything for 3 weeks, every stolen kiss, every inappropriate touch, every moment when they thought they were alone in my home. The smart home security system I'd installed 6 months earlier wasn't just protecting us from burglars anymore. By the time I finished my presentation with a smile plastered on my face, I had enough footage to destroy Derek's reputation, his business partnership, and his claim to half of everything we'd built together. The question wasn't whether I would use it. The question was how spectacularly I would bring his world crashing down. My name is Natalie Harper, and until that moment in the conference room, I thought I had the perfect suburban life. I was the senior marketing manager at Pinnacle Tech Consulting, pulling in 6 figures while managing campaigns that attracted Fortune 500 clients. Derek owned Harper & Thompson Construction with his college buddy Marcus, building custom homes throughout the Denver metro area. We lived in a pristine neighborhood where kids rode bikes in cul-de-sacs, and neighbors knew each other's names. Our house was the kind of place I'd dreamed about growing up in a cramped apartment complex on the wrong side of Colorado Springs. 5 bedrooms, an open-concept kitchen with granite countertops, a backyard with a playset that Derek had built by hand for Lucas. The mortgage was steep, but between my salary and Derek's growing business, we were comfortable. More than comfortable. Lucas was our miracle baby, born after 2 years of fertility treatments that had drained our savings but filled our hearts. At 6, he was all gangly limbs and gap-toothed grins, obsessed with dinosaurs and convinced he would discover a new species someday. Derek coached his Little League team, and I volunteered for every school fundraiser. We looked like the family in stock photos, the ones selling insurance and breakfast cereal. The cracks started small, the way they always do. Derek working longer hours, claiming new projects required his constant attention. Phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. A distance in bed that he blamed on exhaustion from physical labor. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages went through rough patches after 7 years and the stress of raising a young child. When Derek suggested we hire a babysitter to help with after-school care, I thought it was thoughtful. My job had become increasingly demanding, with clients expecting responses at all hours, and the drive from downtown Denver to Meadowbrook Elementary for pickup was killing my afternoon productivity. A reliable sitter would give us both breathing room. Derek found Chloe through a posting at the University of Colorado, Denver, where she was studying early childhood education. She was exactly what we needed, or so it seemed. Bright, energetic, majoring in exactly the field that would make her great with kids. She had references from 3 other families in nearby Littleton, all glowing reviews about her responsibility and genuine love for children. The first time I met Chloe Martinez, she was sitting in our kitchen wearing a conservative blouse and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She answered my questions thoughtfully, asked intelligent ones about Lucas's routine and any special needs. When Lucas shyly showed her his dinosaur collection, she spent 20 minutes listening to his detailed explanations about the differences between herbivores and carnivores. I was sold immediately. Derek seemed pleased with my choice, maybe a little too pleased, but I attributed his enthusiasm to relief that we'd found good help. Chloe started the following Monday, picking Lucas up from school at 3:30, and staying with him until Derek or I got home around 6. She helped with homework, prepared simple snacks, and even started a small garden with Lucas in our backyard. For the first month, everything was perfect. The arrangement freed up my schedule considerably. I could stay for client dinners without worrying about pickup times, attend networking events that had been impossible before. My boss noticed the increased availability and started giving me more high-profile accounts. Derek's business was booming too, with referrals coming in faster than he and Marcus could handle. We were both rising professionally, and Chloe was the secret weapon that made it all possible. Lucas adored her. She spoke enough Spanish to help him with basic phrases, teaching him to count and name colors in both languages. She played endless games of dinosaur expedition in the backyard, complete with makeshift excavation sites, using sandbox sand. When I came home to find them both covered in dirt, giggling over some imaginary discovery, my heart swelled with gratitude for finding someone who genuinely cared about my son's happiness. The first warning sign came 6 weeks into the arrangement. I arrived home early one Thursday afternoon, hoping to surprise Lucas with tickets to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science for the weekend. My key was barely in the lock when I heard Derek's truck pull into the driveway behind me. He seemed flustered, checking his watch and explaining that he'd forgotten paperwork he needed for a meeting with suppliers. It struck me as odd since Derek was meticulous about preparation, especially for business meetings. He grabbed a folder from his office and left quickly, barely acknowledging Chloe beyond a polite hello. She seemed nervous too, suddenly very focused on helping Lucas with his math homework instead of the animated conversation I'd interrupted when I walked in. I dismissed the strange energy as coincidence. People had off days, awkward moments that meant nothing in the bigger picture. Chloe continued to be wonderful with Lucas, and Derek's business continued growing. If anything, our family seemed stronger than ever on the surface. The second sign came 2 weeks later when I forgot my laptop at home and returned during lunch to retrieve it. The house was quiet, which made sense since Chloe wouldn't arrive for another hour and Derek should have been supervising a foundation pour in Castle Rock. But Derek's truck was in the driveway and I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. I found Derek and Chloe sitting at our breakfast bar, sharing coffee and what looked like an intense conversation. They jumped apart when I entered, Derek explaining that he'd come home with a migraine and Chloe had arrived early to prep for an art project with Lucas. Their explanation was reasonable, but something about their body language felt wrong. The way they avoided eye contact with each other, the slight flush in Chloe's cheeks, the defensive tone in Derek's voice when he insisted he was feeling better and would head back to work. That night in bed, I asked Derek about his headache. He seemed genuinely confused for a moment before remembering his excuse, then launched into a detailed description of symptoms that sounded rehearsed. I began paying closer attention to the little things, his shower routine changing from mornings to evening, new cologne that he claimed was a gift from Marcus, text messages that made him smile in ways that used to be reserved for me. Still, I might have continued making excuses if not for Lucas's innocent comment during dinner one evening in early March. Derek had called to say he'd be late, another emergency at the job site requiring his personal attention. Lucas was pushing broccoli around his plate when he casually mentioned that Daddy had been home that afternoon, helping Chloe reach something on a high shelf in the pantry. My fork stopped midway to my mouth. Derek had specifically told me that morning he wouldn't be home until after 7, that I needed to handle pickup and dinner alone. When I gently asked Lucas if he was sure Daddy had been home, he nodded enthusiastically and launched into a story about how Daddy and Chloe had been whispering about a surprise, probably for my birthday, which was still 2 months away. That night, after Lucas was asleep, I confronted Derek about the discrepancy. He seemed genuinely puzzled at first, then claimed he'd forgotten about the quick stop home to grab blueprints. His confusion felt authentic, but so had every other explanation. I was starting to doubt my own perceptions, wondering if the stress of balancing work and motherhood was making me paranoid. The breaking point came 3 days later when I discovered the credit card charges. I handled most of our finances, but Derek had his own card for business expenses that I rarely reviewed. While organizing receipts for our accountant, I noticed unusual purchases at restaurants during lunch hours, places in downtown Denver, nowhere near any of Derek's current job sites. The dates corresponded perfectly with days when he'd claimed to be too busy for our usual check-in calls. I should have confronted him immediately. Instead, I did what any marketing professional trained in data analysis would do. I started gathering evidence. If Derek was having an affair, I needed proof before making accusations that could destroy our family if I was wrong. The alternative was too devastating to consider without absolute certainty. The nanny cam system had been Derek's idea originally, sold to me as a security measure after a rash of break-ins in nearby neighborhoods. The cameras were discreet, high definition, and connected to an app on both our phones. They covered every room except bedrooms and bathrooms, providing peace of mind when we were away from home. Derek had insisted on professional installation, wanting everything done properly for maximum effectiveness. What Derek hadn't considered was that the system would capture more than just potential intruders. The motion detection alerts I'd initially found annoying became my secret weapon. Every afternoon when I received notifications while at work, I started checking the live feed instead of dismissing them. Most of the time it was exactly what I expected. Chloe helping Lucas with homework, preparing snacks, cleaning up toys, but occasionally the timing was wrong. Alerts during school hours when no one should have been home. Movement in the living room when Chloe and Lucas should have been at the park. Those were the feeds I saved, building a digital folder of evidence that painted an increasingly clear picture of betrayal. The first definitive proof came on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-March. Derek had told me that morning about a crucial meeting with potential investors, something that would keep him busy until well past dinner. The motion alert came at 2:15 p.m., an hour before Chloe's shift officially started. I opened the feed expecting to see our cat triggering the sensor, but instead found Derek and Chloe in our entryway, locked in an embrace that left no room for innocent interpretation. I watched in horrified fascination as they separated just long enough for Derek to check his watch, then disappeared upstairs toward what I assumed was our guest room. They were back in the living room 20 minutes later, Derek straightening his shirt while Chloe fixed her hair. He left through the back door, probably to move his truck from wherever he'd hidden it, and she busied herself preparing the art supplies she'd used to explain her early arrival to Lucas. That evening Derek came home at his usual time, kissing my cheek and asking about my day with the same casual affection he'd shown for years. He complained about the difficult investors, described their unrealistic demands and timeline expectations with convincing frustration. If I hadn't seen the footage, I would have believed every word and sympathized with his professional stress. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom and threw up everything I'd eaten for dinner. The pattern became sickeningly clear over the following week. Derek would invent business emergencies that required his immediate attention, always during Chloe's shift and always in locations that couldn't be easily verified. Chloe would arrive early or stay late, adjusting her schedule to accommodate their meeting. They were using my home, my trust and my childcare arrangement to conduct their affair right under my nose. The cruelest part was how normal everything else remained. Derek still coached Lucas's baseball team, still insisted on family movie nights every Friday. Chloe continued to be wonderful with our son, teaching him new games and helping with school projects with genuine enthusiasm. If I hadn't been watching for deception, I might never have noticed the subtle changes in their dynamic around each other. The careful avoidance of physical contact when I was present, the way their conversations became stilted and formal whenever I entered a room. I started varying my schedule, coming home at unexpected times to test their reaction. The guilty startle in Derek's eyes when I arrived during his supposed lunch meetings. Chloe's nervous chatter when I caught her rearranging throw pillows that she claimed Lucas had messed up during playtime. They were both terrible liars when caught off guard, but excellent actors when they had time to prepare. The financial investigation revealed another layer of betrayal. Derek had been using business account funds to pay for hotel rooms, expensive lunches and jewelry that never made it home to me. The charges were cleverly disguised as business entertainment or equipment purchases, but the patterns were obvious once I knew what to look for. My husband wasn't just cheating on me emotionally and physically, he was stealing from our shared future to finance his affair. Marcus Thompson knew. That became clear during a barbecue at their house in late March, when Derek's business partner made carefully neutral comments about Derek's improved mood and increased energy. When I mentioned how busy Derek had been with new projects, Marcus exchanged a look with his wife that spoke volume. They knew about Chloe, probably had known for weeks and had chosen to protect Derek rather than warn me. The betrayal extended beyond just my marriage. Our entire social circle, built around Derek's business relationships and our children's school activities, had been quietly taking sides without my knowledge. I was the last to know about my own humiliation, the clueless wife everyone pitied but no one respected enough to tell the truth. That realization hardened something inside me that had been cracking for weeks. Derek and Chloe weren't just having an affair, they were making me complicit in my own deception. Every day I came home and thanked Chloe for taking such good care of Lucas. I was paying my husband's mistress for services that went far beyond childcare. Every night I kissed Derek goodnight and asked about his day. I was enabling the elaborate lie that our marriage had become. By early April, I had accumulated over 40 hours of video evidence spanning 3 weeks. Derek and Chloe meeting in my home while Lucas was at school. Intimate conversations on my couch about their feelings for each other and frustrations with sneaking around. Physical encounters that violated every inch of space I considered sacred. I had enough material to end my marriage, destroy Derek's business reputation, and ensure that Chloe never worked with children in Denver again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. The immediate satisfaction of confrontation and drama would fade quickly, leaving me to deal with the complicated aftermath of divorce, custody arrangements, and financial division while Derek and Chloe rode off into their sunset together. If I was going to destroy my life as I knew it, I wanted to make sure the collateral damage was proportional to the betrayal. I needed a plan that would give me maximum leverage and minimum risk. Derek thought he was clever, hiding assets in business accounts and conducting his affair during business hours to maintain plausible deniability. What he didn't realize was that his wife had spent 8 years analyzing market behaviors and predicting consumer responses. I knew how to read patterns, identify vulnerabilities, and execute strategies with precision timing. The nanny cam footage was just the beginning. By the time I was finished gathering evidence, Derek would have nowhere to hide and no allies left to protect him. Chloe would learn that actions have consequences, especially when those actions involve destroying families for selfish gratification, and I would emerge from the wreckage with my dignity intact and my future secure. The transformation from trusting wife to strategic adversary didn't happen overnight. Every morning I still packed Lucas's lunch with cartoon-themed notes and kissed Derek goodbye with practiced affection. Every afternoon I still thanked Chloe for her wonderful care and asked about Lucas's day with genuine interest. The performance required enormous emotional control, but 8 years of client presentations had taught me to compartmentalize personal feelings when professional success was at stake. This was now the most important professional challenge of my life, with stakes higher than any marketing campaign I'd ever managed. The target audience was Derek and everyone who had enabled his deception. The product I was selling was justice, and the campaign timeline was entirely under my control. I just had to decide when to launch and how complete I wanted the destruction to be. The systematic erosion of my marriage had been so gradual that I almost missed it entirely. Looking back with the clarity that only comes from devastating betrayal, I could see how Derek had been conditioning me to accept less while demanding I give more. It started with small requests that seemed reasonable, even considered. Derek began suggesting I take on additional projects at work, framing it as support for my career ambition. When Pinnacle Tech Consulting offered me the Morrison Industries account, a demanding client that required frequent evening meetings, Derek encouraged me to accept despite my concerns about family time. He assured me that he could handle Lucas's schedule, that my success was important to our future financial security. What I didn't realize then was that Derek was creating opportunities for himself. Every late meeting I attended, every business dinner that kept me downtown past 8 o'clock, every weekend conference I traveled to for professional development, gave Derek unsupervised time to establish new routines that would eventually include Chloe Martinez in ways that had nothing to do with childcare. The gradual shift in our physical intimacy followed a predictable pattern that I now recognize as classic cheater behavior. Derek started going to bed earlier, claiming exhaustion from long days managing construction crews. When I joined him, he was either asleep or so tired that conversation felt intrusive. Our weekend mornings, once sacred time for coffee in bed and leisurely connection, became rushed affairs interrupted by urgent phone calls from job sites. Derek had always been passionate about his work, but the intensity reached new levels that spring. He started subscribing to construction industry magazines that arrived daily, spreading blueprints across our dining room table during dinner, and taking calls at all hours from suppliers and subcontractors. When I suggested he was becoming obsessed with the business, he reminded me that my own career demands had increased significantly, that we were both making sacrifices for our family's future prosperity. The gaslighting was so subtle that I questioned my own perceptions more than his explanation. When I mentioned feeling disconnected from him, Derek pointed out how busy I'd been with the Morrison account. When I suggested we needed more family time, he reminded me of the vacations my increased salary would make possible. Every concern I raised was deflected back to my own choices and priorities, making me feel selfish for wanting attention from my own husband. Chloe's integration into our family dynamics happened with calculated precision that I can only appreciate in hindsight. She never overstepped boundaries in obvious ways, never challenged my authority as Lucas's mother, or questioned household rules I'd established. Instead, she became indispensable through small acts of thoughtfulness that made my life easier, while creating emotional bonds with both Derek and Lucas. She started staying later on days when I had important client presentations, ensuring that homework was finished and dinner was started before I arrived home stressed and exhausted. She organized Lucas's backpack and sports equipment the night before games, laying out his uniform and packing snacks without being asked. She even began light housekeeping tasks, loading the dishwasher and folding laundry that accumulated during our busy workday. The most insidious part was how genuinely helpful she seemed. When Lucas struggled with a science project about ecosystems, Chloe researched age-appropriate experiments and gathered materials without increasing our weekend workload. When Derek mentioned needing help organizing his home office, she offered to file invoices and organize receipts during Lucas's screen time. She positioned herself as the solution to problems I didn't even know we had. Derek's appreciation for Chloe's contributions felt natural at first. He would comment on how clean the house looked when we returned from date nights, how well prepared Lucas seemed for school activities, how much easier our evenings had become since hiring reliable help. His praise seemed directed at our good fortune in finding such excellent childcare, not at Chloe personally. But the praise evolved into something more personal over the week. Derek started asking Chloe's opinions about household decisions, like whether we should replace the aging refrigerator or invest in new living room furniture. He consulted her about Lucas's social development, wanting her perspective on which playmates were positive influences and which activities might build confidence. He treated her insights with the same respect he once reserved for my maternal instinct. The shift in Lucas's loyalty was perhaps the most painful aspect of the entire situation, not because he loved Chloe, which was natural and healthy for a child forming relationships with caregivers, but because Derek encouraged a dynamic that subtly undermined my role as the primary parent. When Lucas had questions about homework, Derek would suggest asking Chloe, since she was studying education and understood child development better than we did. When Lucas wanted to try new activities like guitar lessons or martial arts, Derek would ask Chloe to research options and costs, positioning her as the family's expert on child-related decisions. When Lucas struggled with social situations at school, Derek would have private conversations with Chloe about strategies, then present their joint recommendations to me as if I hadn't been successfully parenting my son for 6 years. The most devastating realization was how Derek had been systematically excluding me from decisions about our own household while including Chloe in conversations that should have been private between spouses. She knew about our financial goals, our concerns about Lucas's academic performance, our debates about home renovations, and our plans for family vacation. Meanwhile, I was increasingly left out of discussions about day-to-day logistics, because Chloe was handling more responsibilities, and Derek was relying on her judgment. The erosion of boundaries happened so gradually that each individual step seemed reasonable. Of course, Derek would discuss Lucas's schedule with his primary caregiver, Of course, he would want input from someone with education training when making decisions about our child's development. Of course, he would appreciate help with household organization when both parents were working demanding jobs. What I failed to recognize was that Derek was creating emotional intimacy with Chloe through shared responsibility and decision-making, while simultaneously distancing himself from me through criticism and neglect. Every suggestion I made about parenting was countered with something Chloe had recommended. Every concern I raised about household management was dismissed because Chloe was already handling the situation more efficiently. The financial manipulation began around the same time, but was even more carefully disguised. Derek had always managed the construction business finances, while I handled our personal accounts and investments. We had separate checking accounts for discretionary spending but shared all major financial decisions, and maintained joint savings for family goals like Lucas's college fund and our retirement planning. Derek started requesting larger transfers from our joint savings to the business account, explaining that spring construction season required significant upfront costs for materials and equipment. The amounts seemed reasonable given the expansion of Harper & Thompson Construction, and Derek provided detailed explanations about inventory investments and cash flow management that sounded professional and well-researched. What I didn't realize was that Derek was using business account funds for personal expenses that had nothing to do with construction projects. The hotel charges I eventually discovered were categorized as client entertainment. The expensive restaurant bills were listed as business meetings with potential investors. The jewelry purchases were recorded as gifts for valued customers, a practice that seemed questionable but not impossible in a relationship-based industry. Derek's requests for financial information became more frequent and urgent. He needed copies of my pay stubs for loan applications, documentation of my stock options for partnership discussions with Marcus, and detailed records of my retirement contributions for business planning purposes. Every request came with legitimate-sounding explanations that made sense given the growth of his company and our shared financial goals. I provided everything he asked for because trust was the foundation of our marriage. If Derek needed financial documentation for business purposes, I assumed he was protecting our family's interests and planning for our collective future. The possibility that he was actually calculating my assets for divorce planning never occurred to me because I couldn't imagine Derek being capable of such calculated deception. The isolation from our social circle happened so subtly that I didn't notice until it was nearly complete. Derek started declining invitations to neighborhood gatherings, claiming work obligations or fatigue from physical labor. When I suggested attending alone, he expressed hurt that I would want to socialize without him, making me feel guilty for maintaining friendships that didn't include my husband. Our couple friends from before marriage began receiving excuses about babysitting difficulties or conflicting schedules whenever they invited us for dinner parties or weekend activity. Derek convinced me that we needed to focus on family time instead of social obligations, that Lucas would benefit more from quiet weekends at home than from adult gatherings where he felt excluded or bored. The friends we did maintain were primarily connected to Derek's business or Lucas's school activities, relationships that served practical purposes rather than providing emotional support. The people who knew me independently, who might have noticed changes in my behavior or offered perspective on my marriage, gradually disappeared from our regular social interaction. Marcus Thompson and his wife Jennifer became our primary social contacts, which seemed natural given the business partnership between Derek and Marcus. But their loyalty was clearly to Derek, and their observations about our marriage were filtered through their desire to maintain profitable business relationships. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by work and family responsibilities, Jennifer suggested that successful women always struggled with balance, implying that my stress was a personal failing rather than a relationship problem. The most painful aspect of social isolation was how Derek presented our withdrawal from friendships as a mutual decision based on family priorities. When longtime friends stopped calling after repeated cancellations, Derek reminded me that we had chosen to focus on our nuclear family unit. When colleagues invited me to networking events or social gatherings, Derek encouraged me to prioritize time with Lucas instead of building professional relationships that might not benefit our family directly. I was being systematically cut off from outside perspectives, while being convinced that the isolation was my choice. Derek framed every social obligation as a burden rather than an opportunity, every friendship as a drain on our family resources rather than a source of support and joy. By the time I realized how lonely I had become, the effort required to rebuild those connections felt overwhelming. The gaslighting reached its peak during our discussions about Chloe's role in our household. When I expressed minor concerns about boundaries, Derek reminded me of how grateful I had been for her help during my busiest periods at work. When I suggested that we might be becoming too dependent on hired help, Derek pointed out that I had been the one to insist on finding quality childcare in the first place. Every positive change in our family's functioning was attributed to Chloe's contributions, while every problem or stress was traced back to my professional demands or unrealistic expectations. Derek convinced me that my concerns about Chloe stemmed from working mother guilt rather than legitimate observations about changing family dynamics. He suggested that I was projecting my own insecurities about work-life balance onto an innocent young woman who was simply doing her job well. The manipulation was so effective that I began questioning my own judgment about basic observations. When Chloe and Derek seemed unusually comfortable together, I wondered if I was being paranoid. When their conversations seemed to exclude me, I assumed I was being oversensitive. When Lucas started going to Chloe with problems he once brought to me, I worried that I was becoming jealous of my own childcare provider. Derek's strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. He didn't have to convince me that nothing inappropriate was happening between him and Chloe. He just had to convince me that my suspicions were evidence of my own emotional instability and unfair to a young woman who was helping our family succeed. By the time I had definitive proof of their affair, I had been conditioned to doubt my own perceptions so thoroughly that I almost questioned the evidence of my own eyes. The breaking point came not from dramatic confrontation but from exhausted recognition that I was living in an elaborate fiction constructed by people who had no respect for my intelligence or dignity. Derek and Chloe had built their relationship on the foundation of my trust, using my home and my child as cover for behavior that violated every commitment Derek had made to me and every professional boundary Chloe should have maintained, but they had made a crucial miscalculation. They assumed that their careful manipulation had made me weak and dependent, that my conditioning to doubt myself had destroyed my ability to take decisive action. They didn't understand that the same analytical skills that made me successful at work could be applied to gathering evidence and planning strategy. They had mistaken my loyalty for stupidity and my love for helplessness. The nanny cam footage was just the beginning of my evidence collection. Once I knew what I was looking for, the patterns of deception became obvious and trackable. Derek's business records revealed a trail of financial misconduct that went far beyond funding his affair. Chloe's social media posts, which I had never bothered to check before, showed expensive purchases and lifestyle choices that her part-time childcare salary couldn't possibly support. Most importantly, their arrogance had made them careless. They had become so confident in their ability to manipulate me that they stopped being careful about covering their tracks. Phone records showed calls and texts at times when they claimed to be occupied with other activities. GPS data from Derek's business truck revealed stops at locations that had nothing to do with construction projects. Credit card records showed purchases that contradicted their explanations about whereabouts and activities. By mid-April, I had assembled a comprehensive picture of betrayal that extended far beyond simple adultery. Derek had been stealing from our marriage financially while undermining me emotionally. Chloe had been accepting payment for services she wasn't providing while actively participating in the destruction of the family that employed her. Both of them had been using Lucas as an unwitting prop in their deception, exposing him to inappropriate behavior and confusing relationship dynamics that could affect his understanding of trust and commitment for years to come. The evidence was damning enough to destroy both of their reputations and ensure that I emerged from divorce proceedings with maximum financial protection and custody rights. But I wasn't ready to act yet because I wanted to understand the full scope of their plans before exposing their current behavior. If Derek was preparing to leave me for Chloe, I needed to know about hidden assets and future intentions. If they were planning to continue their affair while maintaining the status quo, I needed to document ongoing deception rather than just historical evidence. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day I had to smile at Chloe when she arrived to care for my son, knowing that she was violating my trust in the most fundamental way possible. Every night I had to share a bed with Derek, listening to him lie about his day while planning my response to months of calculated betrayal. Every moment of normalcy felt like a performance that was draining my emotional resources while strengthening my resolve for justice, but the waiting also gave me time to plan a response that would be proportional to the effect. Derek and Chloe had spent months carefully constructing their deception, using my own resources and relationships against me. They deserved a response that matched their level of planning and exceeded their expectations for consequence. I was no longer the trusting wife who made excuses for suspicious behavior. I was a woman who had been awakened to the reality of her situation and was prepared to fight for her future with every weapon at her disposal. The discovery of Derek's affair had awakened something primal in me, a survival instinct that had been dormant throughout years of comfortable suburban life. But it wasn't just the betrayal that fueled my transformation from trusting wife to strategic adversary. It was the calculated nature of their deception, the way they had used my own resources and relationships to build their foundation of lies, that demanded a response equal to their level of planning and cruelty. My first step was establishing secure communication channels that Derek couldn't monitor or intercept. I opened a new email account using my maiden name, and accessed it only from my work computer, never from devices connected to our home network. I purchased a prepaid phone with cash, storing it in my office desk drawer and using it exclusively for calls related to my investigation. These precautions seemed paranoid at first, but Derek's access to our shared technology made them necessary for maintaining the element of surprise. The financial investigation required delicate maneuvering since Derek handled most of our business accounts and investment decisions. I started by requesting copies of all our financial documents for what I claimed was a comprehensive insurance review. The agent I contacted was genuinely helpful, providing detailed breakdowns of our assets and liabilities that revealed discrepancies I never would have noticed without professional guidance. Our joint savings account showed regular transfers to Derek's business account that were significantly larger than the amounts he had mentioned during our conversations about cash flow management. When I compared these transfers to the business income reported on our tax returns, the math didn't align with Derek's explanations about seasonal construction demands. Either Harper and Thompson Construction was far less profitable than Derek claimed, or he was using business funds for purposes that had nothing to do with legitimate expenses. I scheduled a lunch meeting with Patricia Green, our neighbor who worked as a forensic accountant for divorce attorneys. Patricia had always been friendly but not particularly close, which made her perfect for my purposes. I could seek professional advice without arousing suspicion from our social circle. Over salads at a downtown restaurant far from our neighborhood haunts, I explained that I was helping a friend whose husband might be hiding assets during divorce proceedings. Patricia listened with the calm professionalism of someone who had heard similar stories countless times. She provided me with a checklist of documents to gather and red flags to watch for, emphasizing the importance of documenting everything before confronting a potentially deceptive spouse. Her most valuable advice was about timing and legal protection, warning me that premature accusations could drive someone to hide assets more effectively. The conversation with Patricia crystallized my understanding that Derek's affair was just one component of a larger pattern of financial deception. If he was willing to steal from our marriage to fund his relationship with Chloe, he was probably also preparing to protect himself during the inevitable divorce proceedings. My investigation needed to expand beyond documenting adultery to uncovering the full scope of his financial misconduct. Bank records revealed a troubling pattern of cash withdrawals from business accounts that couldn't be explained by normal construction expenses. Derek was pulling out several $100s in cash every week, amounts that added up to thousands over the months since Chloe started working for us. When I cross-referenced these withdrawals with his calendar and my nanny cam footage, they correlated perfectly with days when he met Chloe at our house. The jewelry purchases I discovered were even more damning because Derek had been so careless about covering his tracks. The receipts were filed with business records as customer gifts, but the itemized descriptions revealed pieces that were clearly personal jewelry rather than corporate thank you gifts. Diamond earrings, a gold bracelet and a pendant necklace with an inscription that read, "Forever yours," were hardly appropriate gifts for construction clients. Most devastating was the discovery that Derek had been photographing important documents from my work and personal files. My laptop's browsing history showed searches for information about stock options, retirement account regulations, and Colorado divorce law that I had never conducted. The timestamps corresponded with evenings when I was attending client meetings or traveling for business conferences, times when Derek had unrestricted access to my personal information. The scope of Derek's planning became clear when I found printed articles about asset protection strategies and divorce preparation tactics hidden in his office filing cabinet. These weren't recent desperate searches by a man caught in an affair. They were methodical research conducted over months, suggesting that Derek had been planning our divorce long before I discovered his relationship with Chloe. The affair wasn't a crime of passion that spiraled out of control. It was part of a calculated exit strategy from our marriage. Chloe's role in the deception extended far beyond just sleeping with my husband. Her social media accounts, which I began monitoring through fake profiles I created, revealed a lifestyle that was inconsistent with her supposed income from part-time babysitting. She was dining at expensive restaurants, wearing designer clothing, and taking weekend trips to resort destinations that cost more than her monthly salary from our family. The most disturbing discovery was a series of photos from what appeared to be a romantic getaway to Vail that had taken place during a weekend when Derek claimed to be attending a construction industry conference in Grand Junction. Chloe's Instagram posts from that weekend were carefully cropped to avoid showing her companion, but the luxury hotel suite and expensive dining experiences told a clear story about who was funding her elevated lifestyle. My investigation into Chloe's background revealed inconsistencies that I should have caught during the hiring process. The references she provided were legitimate, but when I called them with follow-up questions about her performance, their responses were notably lukewarm. One mother mentioned that Chloe had been adequate but not exceptional, and had left their employment rather suddenly. Another family described her as professional but distant, and noted that she had seemed more interested in the father's schedule than the children's needs. The University of Colorado Denver registrar confirmed that Chloe was enrolled in early childhood education courses, but her academic performance was mediocre at best. She was taking the minimum course load required to maintain student status, and her grades suggested that education was not her primary focus or passion. The caring, dedicated future teacher I thought I had hired was actually a young woman using her student status as cover for other activity. More troubling was the discovery that Chloe had been asking Lucas detailed questions about our family finances and routines. When I began listening more carefully to Lucas's innocent chatter about his days with Chloe, disturbing patterns emerged. She had been asking about my work schedule, Derek's business meetings, and our family's weekend plans with the kind of systematic interest that went far beyond normal childcare responsibility. Lucas mentioned that Chloe had asked whether Mommy and Daddy ever fought, whether I ever seemed sad or angry, and whether there were any secrets in our family that adults talked about when children weren't listening. These questions, presented to a 6-year-old as casual conversation, were actually intelligence gathering designed to help Derek and Chloe understand the state of our marriage and plan their strategy accordingly. The betrayal felt even more personal when I realized that Chloe had been using my son as an unwitting source of information about our family's vulnerability. Every detail Lucas innocently shared about my emotional state or concerns was being transmitted to Derek and used to manipulate our relationship. My child had become a spy in his own home without understanding the true nature of the game being played around him. The evidence collection process required maintaining perfect normalcy while documenting every suspicious interaction and gathering proof of ongoing deception. I installed additional security cameras in areas not covered by our original system, hiding them in decorative objects that blended seamlessly with our home decor. These cameras captured intimate conversations between Derek and Chloe that revealed the full extent of their emotional connection and future planning. One particularly damaging recording captured Derek promising Chloe that their relationship would become public after he dealt with the Natalie situation in a way that protected his business interest and custody rights. They discussed moving in together once Derek's divorce was finalized, with Chloe helping to raise Lucas as a stepmother figure who already understood his needs and preferences. The casual way they discussed dismantling my family and replacing me in my son's life was breathtaking in its cruelty. Derek spoke about me as if I were a business problem to be solved rather than the mother of his child and partner of 7 years. Chloe expressed excitement about decorating Derek's future bachelor pad and becoming Lucas's primary female influence, as if my removal from their lives was an inevitable business transaction rather than the destruction of a family. Their conversations revealed that Derek had been consulting with a divorce attorney for months, developing strategies to minimize his financial obligations and maximize his custody rights. The attorney had apparently advised him to document any evidence of my emotional instability or career prioritization that could be used to argue that Lucas would be better served living primarily with his father and stepmother figure. This explained Derek's recent pattern of encouraging me to take on additional work responsibilities and travel commitments. He wasn't supporting my career development out of love and partnership. He was creating evidence that I was an absent mother who prioritized professional success over family stability. Every late meeting and business trip I accepted was being documented as proof that Derek was the more present and reliable parent. The realization that my own husband had been setting me up for character assassination during custody proceedings triggered a level of rage I had never experienced before. Derek wasn't just betraying our marriage vows and financial commitment. He was actively working to limit my relationship with Lucas, based on lies and manufactured evidence about my parenting priorities. I began counter-documenting everything, creating a comprehensive record of my involvement in Lucas's daily life and school activity. I saved every email exchange with teachers, every photo from school events I attended, every receipt from activities and purchases I made for Lucas's benefit. If Derek wanted to play the game of evidence collection, I would ensure that my documentation was more thorough and compelling than his manipulation. The legal research phase of my investigation taught me about Colorado's approach to divorce proceedings and asset division. As a no-fault divorce state, Colorado didn't require proof of adultery to grant a divorce, but evidence of marital misconduct could influence financial settlements and custody decisions. Derek's affair and financial deception could work in my favor if properly documented and presented. I learned about constructive fraud, a legal concept that applied perfectly to Derek's situation. By hiding assets and manipulating financial information while married, Derek had committed legal fraud against our marital partnership. This could allow me to claim a larger share of our assets as compensation for his misconduct, potentially including portions of his business interests that he assumed were protected from divorce proceedings. The discovery that Derek had been transferring business assets to Marcus Thompson's name suggested even more sophisticated attempts at hiding wealth. Property records showed that equipment and vehicles registered to Harper and Thompson Construction had been transferred to Marcus's personal ownership just months after Chloe started working for us. These transfers appeared to be part of a coordinated effort to move assets beyond my reach before filing for divorce. I hired a private investigator named James Sullivan, paying his retainer fee from a personal credit card that Derek didn't monitor. James was a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial investigations, and his initial consultation confirmed that Derek's behavior followed classic patterns of premeditated divorce preparation. James's services would provide professional documentation of the affair while I focused on gathering financial evidence. James's surveillance confirmed what my nanny cam footage had already revealed, but his professional documentation would be admissible in court proceedings. His photographs showed Derek and Chloe meeting at hotels during business hours, sharing intimate dinners at restaurants across the metro area, and engaging in public displays of affection that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. More importantly, James was able to document Derek's attempts to hide business income and manipulate financial records. His investigation revealed that Harper and Thompson Construction was far more profitable than Derek had disclosed, with several major contracts that generated significant revenue that never appeared in our household financial planning discussion. The private investigation also uncovered Chloe's real motivation for pursuing Derek, her financial records which James obtained through legal channels, showed significant student loan debt and credit card obligations that exceeded her legitimate income by thousands of dollars. Derek wasn't just her employer's husband whom she happened to find attractive, he was her financial salvation, a wealthy man who could solve her money problems and provide the lifestyle she wanted but couldn't afford. James's research into Chloe's background revealed a pattern of targeting older, financially stable men through employment opportunities. She had worked for 3 other families in the Denver area over the past 2 years, and in each case her employment had ended amid whispered speculation about inappropriate relationships with married fathers. The families had chosen not to pursue formal complaints to protect their own reputations, allowing Chloe to continue her pattern with new victims. The realization that I was just the latest target in Chloe's systematic exploitation of wealthy families added another layer of violation to an already devastating situation. Derek's affair wasn't the result of genuine emotional connection or uncontrollable passion. It was a calculated seduction by a woman who made a practice of destroying families for financial gain, and Derek had been too arrogant or stupid to recognize that he was being manipulated. By early May, my evidence collection had created a comprehensive picture of betrayal, fraud, and premeditated deception that extended far beyond simple adultery. Derek and Chloe had conspired to steal from my marriage financially, while planning to replace me emotionally in my son's life. Their behavior represented not just personal betrayal but criminal fraud that could result in serious legal consequences beyond divorce proceedings. The evidence was strong enough to ensure favorable outcomes in divorce court, but I wasn't ready to proceed with legal action yet. Derek and Chloe still believed they were successfully deceiving me, which meant they would continue making mistakes and revealing additional information about their plan. The longer I waited to confront them, the more comprehensive my evidence would become, and the more devastating the consequences would be when I finally acted. I was no longer the naive wife who made excuses for suspicious behavior and trusted her husband's explanations about business emergencies. I had become a woman on a mission, gathering evidence with the same methodical precision I applied to marketing campaigns. Derek and Chloe had underestimated my intelligence and determination, assuming that their manipulation had made me weak and dependent. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they had been about my capacity for strategic thinking and decisive action. The only question remaining was time. I could act immediately with the evidence I had already gathered, or I could wait for additional opportunities to document their ongoing deception. The decision would depend on whether Derek and Chloe escalated their behavior in ways that threatened Lucas's well-being or my financial security. If they remained content with their current level of deception, I could afford to be patient and gather even more damaging evidence. But if they showed signs of accelerating their timeline or taking actions that could harm my son, I would be ready to deploy my arsenal of proof and bring their house of lies crashing down around them. The opportunity to spring my trap came sooner than expected, delivered through Lucas's innocent excitement about a school event that would become the perfect stage for Derek and Chloe's final performance as secret lovers. Meadowbrook Elementary was hosting their annual spring festival on Friday evening, a family-friendly carnival with games, food booths, and entertainment that the entire community attended. Lucas had been selected to perform in the second-grade choir, an honor that filled him with pride and anticipation. Derek had initially agreed to attend the festival together as a family, but Thursday morning brought his familiar pattern of manufactured emergency. A water main break at the Thornton project site required his immediate attention, he explained over coffee, showing me photos on his phone of construction equipment surrounded by muddy water. The timing was unfortunate since he knew how important the festival was to Lucas, but emergencies couldn't be scheduled around family events. I expressed appropriate disappointment while internally celebrating the gift Derek had just handed me. His absence from the school festival would provide the perfect opportunity to test whether Chloe would maintain professional boundaries or reveal her true relationship with my husband. More importantly, it would give me the chance to publicly demonstrate my role as Lucas's devoted mother, while privately gathering final evidence of their betrayal. That afternoon, I implemented a plan I had been developing for weeks. I called Chloe during my lunch break, explaining that Derek's work emergency would prevent him from attending Lucas's performance, but that I didn't want to disappoint our son by canceling entirely. Would she be willing to accompany Lucas and me to the festival as additional support, helping with logistics while I focused on enjoying his performance? Chloe's immediate enthusiasm confirmed my suspicions about her motivation. She didn't just agree to attend the school event on her own time, she offered to arrive early to help Lucas prepare, suggested coordinating our outfits so we looked like a cohesive family unit, and asked detailed questions about which other parents would be attending. Her eagerness to play the role of supportive family member at a public school function revealed how completely she had embraced the fantasy of replacing me in Lucas's life. The festival setup began at 4 o'clock Friday afternoon, with parent volunteers decorating the gymnasium and setting up game booths while children attended their final rehearsal. I arrived early with Lucas, wearing a casual sundress that photographed well while remaining appropriate for a school function. The hidden recording device in my purse would capture audio of any conversations with Chloe, while the obvious camera around my neck would document our interactions for anyone who might question my version of events later. Chloe arrived precisely on time, wearing an outfit that was notably more sophisticated than typical babysitter attire. Her fitted dress and heeled sandals were more appropriate for a dinner date than a children's carnival, but she had clearly put effort into presenting herself as someone who belonged in our family unit. The other parents would certainly notice her presence and draw conclusions about her relationship to Derek and me. The first test came during setup when several other mothers approached to introduce themselves to Chloe, curious about the young woman they hadn't seen at previous school events. I watched carefully as Chloe navigated these conversations, noting how she positioned herself in relation to Lucas and me. She introduced herself as Lucas's caregiver, but allowed people to assume she held a more significant role in our family structure than temporary employee. When Mrs. Rodriguez from Lucas's class asked about Derek's absence, Chloe immediately stepped forward to explain about the work emergency before I could respond. She spoke with the authority of someone intimately familiar with Derek's professional obligations, describing the construction crisis with details that no casual babysitter should have known. Her familiarity with Derek's business schedule and priorities revealed the depth of their personal conversations. More damaging was Chloe's behavior during Lucas's choir performance. Instead of standing discreetly in the background as hired help should, she positioned herself beside me in the front row, holding my phone to record Lucas's performance while I applauded to outside observers. We appeared to be two mothers proudly supporting the same child, with Chloe filling the role that Derek's absence had created. The recording device captured Chloe's whispered comments throughout the performance, remarks that revealed her emotional investment in Lucas's success and her assumption of maternal authority. She pointed out which child was slightly off-key, suggested that Lucas's teacher should have positioned him more prominently in the arrangement, and expressed pride in his performance using language typically reserved for biological parents. After the performance, Chloe naturally took charge of logistics that should have been my responsibility as Lucas's mother. She retrieved his backpack from the classroom, coordinated with other parents about post-festival plans, and made decisions about which carnival games we would visit first. Her comfortable assumption of parental authority in a public setting demonstrated how completely she had mentally replaced me in the family structure. The most revealing moment came when we encountered Derek's business partner Marcus Thompson and his family at the ring toss booth. Marcus seemed genuinely surprised to see Chloe at a school function, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding as he observed her interactions with Lucas and me. The brief conversation that followed provided exactly the evidence I needed about the extent of Derek's deception within his professional circle. Marcus asked about Derek's whereabouts with the casual familiarity of someone who knew Derek's actual schedule differed from his claimed emergency. When Chloe smoothly explained about the water main crisis, Marcus's raised eyebrow suggested this was the first he had heard of any major problems at the Thornton site. His polite but skeptical response confirmed that Derek's work emergency was fabricated, and that his business partner was aware something unusual was happening with Derek's family arrangement. The conversation with Marcus also revealed that Derek had been discussing our family situation with his business associates in ways that painted me as an absent or difficult spouse. Marcus made pointed comments about how nice it was to see me at a school function, implying that my attendance was unusual rather than routine. He expressed appreciation for Chloe's dedication to Lucas's well-being, using language that suggested Derek had presented her as a necessary compensation for my alleged shortcomings as a mother. Throughout the evening, I documented every interaction while maintaining the appearance of a grateful mother enjoying her son's school festival with the help of dedicated childcare. The other parents' reactions to Chloe's presence provided valuable insights into how Derek and Chloe's relationship was being perceived within our community. Some mothers seemed confused by the dynamics they observed, while others appeared to be deliberately avoiding conversations that might require them to acknowledge uncomfortable realities about our family situation. The festival games provided opportunities for Chloe to demonstrate her territorial behavior toward Lucas in increasingly obvious ways. At the basketball throw, she coached his technique with the intensity of a parent invested in his athletic development. At the face painting booth, she made aesthetic decisions about his design choices, while I handled the payment. During the cakewalk, she celebrated his victory with enthusiasm that exceeded appropriate employee boundaries. Most revealing was Chloe's interaction with Lucas's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who approached us near the end of the evening to discuss Lucas's academic progress. Chloe immediately inserted herself into the conversation, asking detailed questions about Lucas's social development and offering insights about his behavior at home that demonstrated intimate knowledge of his emotional patterns and learning style. Ms. Patterson's confused glances between Chloe and me during this conversation suggested that previous communications about Lucas had created expectations about family dynamics that didn't match what she was observing. Chloe spoke with the authority of someone who attended parent-teacher conferences and made educational decisions, while I appeared to be deferring to her expertise about my own child's development. The evening concluded with Chloe suggesting we stop for ice cream to celebrate Lucas's successful performance, a proposal she made directly to Lucas without consulting me first. When Lucas enthusiastically agreed, Chloe automatically assumed we would all go together, planning the logistics of car arrangements and restaurant selection with the presumption that family decisions were made collectively rather than by parents alone. During the ice cream celebration at a nearby shop, Chloe's behavior reached new levels of inappropriate familiarity. She shared inside jokes with Lucas about their afternoon activities, referenced conversations they had shared about his friendships and interests, and made plans for weekend activities that extended far beyond her official work schedule. Her casual assumption of ongoing involvement in Lucas's life revealed how completely she had embraced the role of permanent family member. The recording device captured Chloe's phone conversation with Derek while Lucas was in the restroom, a call that provided devastating evidence of their coordination and emotional intimacy. She reported on the evening's events with the detailed familiarity of a romantic partner, describing interactions with other parents and sharing observations about community dynamics that would only matter to someone planning a future within that social circle. Most damaging was Chloe's side of the conversation about Derek's fictitious work emergency. She expressed sympathy for his difficult day while confirming details about their weekend plans that contradicted his supposed professional obligation. The casual intimacy of their phone conversation, conducted in public while she was technically working for me, demonstrated their complete disregard for professional boundaries and basic respect for my family. When Derek called to check on Lucas's performance, Chloe answered my phone without permission, speaking to my husband with the comfortable authority of someone who regularly handled family communication. She provided detailed updates about the evening while making plans for Derek to stop by our house later to hear about Lucas's success directly from him. Her assumption that Derek would be visiting our home after his work emergency concluded revealed their ongoing coordination and plan. The drive home provided final evidence of Chloe's territorial behavior and emotional manipulation of Luke. She spent the entire trip reinforcing her importance in his life, reminding him of special activities they had planned, and expressing pride in his performance with language designed to create emotional dependence. Her systematic undermining of my maternal authority continued even when she thought she was unobserved and unrecorded. Most concerning was Chloe's casual mention of conversations she claimed to have had with Derek about Lucas's future educational and social development. She referenced discussions about summer camp options, extracurricular activities, and parenting strategies that should have been private conversations between spouses. Her intimate knowledge of Derek's opinions about child-rearing decisions revealed the extent to which she had been included in discussions about my son's future. By the time we arrived home, I had gathered conclusive evidence that Derek and Chloe's relationship had progressed far beyond physical affair to complete emotional and practical partnership. They were actively planning a future together that included Lucas, making decisions about his welfare and development while systematically excluding me from the family structure they intended to create. The evening had also demonstrated that their deception was becoming public knowledge within our community, with other parents and Derek's business associates clearly aware that something inappropriate was happening even if they chose not to address it directly. The facade of normal family life was crumbling, and Derek and Chloe's arrogance was making them increasingly careless about maintaining appearance. Derek arrived at our house 20 minutes after we returned home, ostensibly to hear about Lucas's performance but clearly planning to spend time with Chloe while maintaining the pretense of paternal interest. His timing was too perfect to be coincidental, confirming that they had coordinated his visit during their phone conversation at the ice cream shop. The reunion between Derek and Chloe in our living room provided final evidence of their emotional intimacy and future planning. While Lucas enthusiastically recounted his evening, Derek and Chloe exchanged looks and touches that revealed their romantic connection. Their comfortable physical proximity and synchronized responses to Lucas's stories demonstrated the depth of their partnership and shared investment in his well-being. Most damaging was their casual discussion of weekend plans that included activities Derek had never mentioned to me. They referenced restaurant reservations, hiking destinations, and social events with the comfortable familiarity of an established couple making routine domestic arrangements. Their planning assumed Lucas's availability and interest without consulting me about custody or supervision arrangement. When Derek suggested that Chloe stay for a late dinner to continue celebrating Lucas's successful performance, I finally had the confirmation I needed about their complete disregard for professional boundaries and basic respect for my marriage. Derek was inviting his mistress to share a family meal in our home while expecting me to participate in the charade of normal domestic life. The recording device captured their entire interaction, providing irrefutable evidence of emotional affair, financial fraud, and conspiracy to undermine my parental authority. Combined with weeks of documented deception and months of financial manipulation, the evening's events completed my comprehensive case for divorce proceedings that would ensure maximum protection of my interests and Lucas's well-being. As I watched Derek and Chloe plan their shared future in my living room while my son played nearby, I felt the last vestiges of doubt and emotional attachment finally dissolve. They had given me everything I needed to destroy their carefully constructed deception and expose their betrayal to everyone who mattered in our personal and professional lives. The only decision remaining was whether to confront them immediately or wait for additional opportunities to document their ongoing conspiracy. Derek's suggestion about dinner had revealed that they were planning to escalate their public display of family unity, which could provide even more damaging evidence but also risk greater emotional harm to Lucas. The time for patient evidence gathering was ended. Derek and Chloe's increasing boldness meant they were approaching the point where their deception would become undeniable public knowledge regardless of my action. If I was going to control the narrative and protect my interests, I needed to act before they had the opportunity to spin their story or hide additional assets. The evening had provided the perfect foundation for my counterattack. Every parent and teacher at the school festival had witnessed Chloe assuming maternal authority while Derek conveniently missed his son's important performance. The contrast between their public deception and private reality would make my eventual revelations even more devastating to their reputations and credibility. Tomorrow would begin the final phase of my response to months of calculated betrayal. Derek and Chloe had spent so much energy building their house of lies that they had forgotten to consider what would happen when someone who understood structural engineering decided to remove the foundation. The confrontation I had been planning for weeks came at the moment of Derek and Chloe's greatest confidence in their deception. Saturday morning arrived with Derek announcing another urgent business trip to Fort Collins, claiming a potential client wanted to tour completed projects before signing a major contract. The timing was perfect since Lucas had been invited to spend the weekend with his best friend Tyler, leaving Derek and Chloe free to pursue their relationship without the complications of childcare responsibility. I helped Derek pack his overnight bag while expressing appropriate disappointment about his weekend absence, all the while knowing that his actual destination was the mountain resort where Chloe had been posting cryptic social media photos about romantic getaways. The private investigator had confirmed their reservation at a luxury cabin rental under Derek's business credit card, complete with couples massage appointments and fine dining reservations that cost more than most families spent on entire vacation. After Derek left for his fabricated business trip, I drove Lucas to Tyler's house for his sleepover, spending extra time talking with Tyler's mother about pickup arrangements for Sunday evening. The conversation served dual purposes: establishing my presence as the responsible parent managing Lucas's social calendar while creating witnesses who could confirm my whereabouts during the weekend's event. With Lucas safely settled at his friend's house and Derek supposedly traveling for business, I implemented the final phase of my plan with surgical precision. The key was timing the revelation to maximize impact while minimizing Derek and Chloe's opportunities to coordinate their response or hide additional evidence of their misconduct. My first call was to Vanessa Kim, the divorce attorney I had been consulting throughout my investigation. Vanessa had reviewed all my evidence and confirmed that Derek's financial fraud and adultery provided grounds for a favorable settlement that would protect both my assets and my custody rights. She had prepared all necessary paperwork for immediate filing, waiting only for my authorization to begin legal proceedings that would freeze Derek's access to business accounts and prevent him from hiding additional assets. The second call was to Detective Rodriguez at the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Derek's use of business funds for personal expenses, combined with his attempts to hide assets from marital property, constituted criminal fraud that warranted investigation beyond civil divorce proceedings. Detective Rodriguez had been expecting my call and was prepared to execute search warrants for Harper and Thompson Construction's financial records as soon as I provided confirmation that Derek was out of town and unable to destroy evidence. The third call was to Marcus Thompson, Derek's business partner who had been complicit in the asset hiding scheme, but had the most to lose if criminal charges were filed against the company. Marcus deserved the opportunity to protect his own interests by cooperating with investigators rather than continuing to enable Derek's fraud. His cooperation would also provide additional evidence about the scope of Derek's financial misconduct. Marcus's reaction to my call confirmed that he had been dreading this conversation for weeks. His immediate willingness to meet with me at his office, despite the Saturday morning timing, revealed his awareness that Derek's behavior was creating legal liability for their entire business operation. The relief in his voice when I assured him that cooperation would be viewed favorably by investigators suggested he had been planning his own exit strategy from Derek's web of deception. The meeting with Marcus took place in the Harper and Thompson construction office, a converted warehouse space in an industrial area of northeast Denver. Marcus had assembled boxes of financial records and business documents that painted a comprehensive picture of Derek's systematic theft from company accounts. The evidence revealed that Derek had been using business credit cards for personal expenses, transferring company funds to accounts in his name alone, and creating false invoices to justify payments that had nothing to do with legitimate construction expenses. Most damaging was Marcus's revelation that Derek had been planning to dissolve their partnership and start a new company with financial backing from an unnamed investor. The investor Marcus suspected was connected to Chloe's family since Derek had been making mysterious references to new capital sources that would allow him to expand operations without relying on traditional business loans or Marcus's continued partnership. Marcus provided me with copies of Derek's communications about the new business venture, emails that revealed Derek's intention to steal their client list and ongoing projects while leaving Marcus responsible for outstanding debts and legal obligations. Derek's plan was to abandon his current business partnership, just as he was abandoning his marriage, leaving behind anyone who might complicate his fresh start with Chloe. The evidence Marcus provided completed the picture of Derek's systematic betrayal of everyone who had trusted him. He wasn't just cheating on me and stealing from our marriage, he was defrauding his business partner and planning to destroy the company they had built together. His relationship with Chloe was just one component of a larger pattern of selfishness and criminal behavior that affected multiple families and business relationships. Armed with Marcus's cooperation and Detective Rodriguez's search warrants, I drove to the luxury mountain resort where Derek and Chloe were enjoying their romantic weekend retreat. The 2-hour drive to the cabin gave me time to finalize the timing of my confrontation and prepare for Derek's inevitable attempts to minimize or deny his behavior when faced with overwhelming evidence of his misconduct. The mountain resort was exactly the kind of expensive destination that Derek's stolen business funds had been financing for months. The cabin rental cost more per night than most people's mortgage payments, with amenities that included a private hot tub, gourmet kitchen, and panoramic views of the surrounding people. Derek's willingness to spend this extravagantly on Chloe while claiming our family needed to budget carefully for routine expenses revealed the extent of his financial deception. I arrived at the cabin just after noon, parking behind Derek's business truck that was loaded with camping equipment and supplies that definitely hadn't been purchased for construction purposes. The peaceful mountain setting would have been romantic under different circumstances, but the betrayal it represented filled me with cold determination rather than any lingering sadness about my failed marriage. The confrontation began when Derek answered the cabin door wearing casual clothes that I had never seen before, expensive outdoor gear that must have been purchased during one of his shopping trips with Chloe. His shocked expression when he saw me confirmed that he had become completely comfortable with his double life, never expecting that his two worlds would collide at the moment of his greatest vulnerability. Chloe appeared behind Derek wrapped in a bathrobe that clearly wasn't hers, her hair disheveled and her face flushed with the unmistakable glow of someone who had been interrupted during intimate activity. The tableau was perfect for the photographs I needed to document their relationship, images that would provide irrefutable proof of adultery for divorce proceedings and employment termination for Chloe's university student Adolf. Derek's first instinct was denial, claiming that Chloe had driven up separately to discuss Lucas's summer care needs and that their shared accommodation was simply a cost-saving measure for business planning purposes. The explanation was so ridiculous that even Chloe looked embarrassed by Derek's inability to construct a believable lie when caught completely off guard. I allowed Derek to continue fabricating explanations while I quietly recorded everything on my phone, capturing his desperate attempts to maintain the fiction that their relationship was purely professional. His lies became increasingly elaborate and contradictory, revealing his panic at being discovered and his complete inability to think strategically under pressure. When Derek finally realized that his denials were only making his situation worse, he shifted to anger and accusation, demanding to know how I had found them and accusing me of stalking and invasion of privacy. His outrage at being caught was typical of someone who had become so comfortable with deception that he genuinely believed he was entitled to conduct his affair without interference or consequence. Chloe's response was more calculating, immediately recognizing that her financial security and educational opportunities were at risk if their relationship became public knowledge. She attempted to minimize her role in the affair, claiming that Derek had pursued her aggressively and that she had tried to maintain professional boundaries despite his persistent romantic advances. The conversation that followed revealed the true nature of their relationship and future planning in ways that no amount of surveillance could have captured. Derek and Chloe had been living in a fantasy world where their actions had no consequences and their victims would simply accept being discarded without fighting back. Their shock at being held accountable for their choices was both satisfying and deeply revealing about their character. Derek's attempts to negotiate and minimize the damage included offers to end his relationship with Chloe immediately, promises to seek counseling for his behavioral problem, and increasingly desperate pleas for me to consider Lucas's well-being before making any decisions that would disrupt our family structure. His sudden concern for our son's emotional stability was particularly hollow given his months of reckless behavior that had already damaged Lucas's sense of security and family stability. More revealing was Derek's assumption that financial compensation could resolve the situation without legal consequences or social embarrassment. He offered to give me a larger share of our assets in exchange for a quiet divorce, suggested that we could maintain the appearance of an amicable separation to protect his business reputation, and even proposed that Chloe could continue working for our family if I was willing to overlook their personal relationship. The delusional nature of Derek's proposals confirmed that he had no understanding of the severity of his situation or the strength of the evidence I had gathered against him. He still believed that his charm and financial resources could manipulate the outcome, just as he had been manipulating our marriage for months while pursuing his relationship with Chloe. I ended the confrontation by informing Derek and Chloe that divorce papers had already been filed, business assets had been frozen pending investigation of financial fraud, and criminal charges were being considered based on evidence of systematic theft from company accounts. Their weekend retreat was being cut short not by my emotional demands, but by legal realities that would reshape both their lives permanently. Derek's business partner had cooperated with investigators to protect his own interests, providing documentation of asset hiding and fraudulent business practices that would make Derek's financial misconduct a matter of public record. The University of Colorado Denver had been notified about Chloe's inappropriate relationship with a client's husband, beginning an investigation that would likely result in her dismissal from the education program and loss of student financial. The mountain cabin that had seemed like the perfect romantic hideaway became the scene of Derek's complete emotional breakdown as he realized that his carefully constructed double life was collapsing faster than he could develop strategies to limit the damage. His pleas for mercy and promises of reform revealed his understanding that he had not just lost his marriage and business partnership, but had also destroyed his reputation and financial security through his own arrogance and criminal behavior. Chloe's response was more pragmatic, immediately focusing on protecting herself from the legal and financial consequences of her participation in Derek's deception. She offered to cooperate with investigators and testify about Derek's financial misconduct in exchange for immunity from prosecution, revealing that their romantic relationship had always been secondary to her concern for her own welfare and security. The drive back to Denver gave me time to process the emotional impact of finally confronting the people who had systematically betrayed my trust and undermined my family. The satisfaction of seeing their shock and panic was tempered by sadness about the waste of relationships and opportunities that their selfish choices had created. Derek's affair had destroyed not just our marriage, but also his business partnership, Chloe's educational prospects, and Lucas's sense of family stability. The legal proceedings that followed moved quickly due to the overwhelming evidence of financial fraud and Derek's inability to challenge facts that had been documented through months of careful investigation. The divorce settlement awarded me primary custody of Lucas along with a substantial majority of our marital assets, including Derek's share of the construction business that would be liquidated to satisfy legal judgments and restitution requirements. Derek's attempts to rebuild his life were complicated by criminal charges related to business fraud and the destruction of his professional reputation within Denver's construction industry. Marcus Thompson successfully distanced himself from Derek's misconduct, but their business partnership was dissolved amid ongoing legal battles over debts and obligations that Derek's theft had created. Chloe faced her own consequences through academic disciplinary proceedings and the loss of childcare employment opportunities once her behavior became known within Denver's tight-knit community of affluent families. Her pattern of targeting married fathers for financial gain made her unemployable in positions that required trust and access to family homes. The rebuilding of my life focused on creating stability and security for Lucas while pursuing new professional opportunities that had been delayed by the stress of dealing with Derek's deception. My experience managing a complex investigation while maintaining my career responsibilities had actually strengthened my reputation within the marketing industry, leading to consulting opportunities with clients who valued my analytical skills and strategic thinking. Lucas adjusted to our new family structure with the resilience of childhood, though therapy helped him process the confusion and disappointment of learning that adults he trusted had been lying about important aspects of his daily life. The consistency and honesty of our post-divorce relationship provided him with security that had been missing during the months of Derek's deception. The most satisfying aspect of the entire experience was the recognition that Derek and Chloe's systematic betrayal had ultimately revealed their true characters while strengthening my own resolve and capability. Their assumption that I was too trusting or naive to discover their deception had motivated me to develop investigative and strategic skills that enhanced both my personal confidence and professional effectiveness. The nanny cam footage that had initially devastated me with evidence of betrayal became the foundation for legal victories that protected Lucas's future and ensured that Derek's criminal behavior faced appropriate consequences. Technology that Derek had installed to protect our family from external threats had instead exposed the internal threat that he himself represented to our security and well-being. Years later, I can appreciate the irony that Derek and Chloe's affair actually improved my life by forcing me to develop strength and independence that I might never have discovered within the comfortable confines of a stable marriage. Their betrayal had been intended to discard me quietly while they pursued their selfish desires, but instead it had freed me from relationships that were based on deception and disrespect. The lesson I learned from the entire experience was that trust must be earned through consistent actions rather than assumed based on promises or appearances. Derek's systematic deception had been possible only because I had chosen to believe his explanations rather than investigating suspicious behavior. My willingness to gather evidence and demand accountability had ultimately protected both Lucas and myself from continued exploitation. The evidence I had collected didn't just document Derek and Chloe's betrayal, it had provided me with the tools to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth and self-reliance rather than dependence on people who had proven themselves unworthy of trust. Their attempt to destroy my family had instead taught me that I was capable of protecting what mattered most through careful planning and decisive action. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.